Hello, welcome back, Pouring Nation. Today on Left Brain Artist, we are going to talk about acrylic paint pouring mediums. So, as a new acrylic pouring artist, I generally use my two favorite pouring mediums right now. Floetrol and Elmer's Glue All. They work really well. They're really cheap, and most acrylic paint pouring artists start out with these pouring mediums. However, they're definitely not the only pouring mediums out there. And there are a lot of artists out there that use different paint pouring mediums. And so I bit the bullet. I purchased 11 of the easiest ones I could find. Definitely not all of the pouring mediums, but I bought 11 pouring mediums, and I've been running tests on these pouring mediums to figure out which ones are good, which ones are not so good, reasons why you should buy some, and definitely reasons why you should not buy some of these pouring mediums. And I hope to save you some time, to save you some effort, and give you some ideas of some pouring mediums that you can use next. Now, to set some ground rules, when I did this, I chose to do the same test on every single pouring medium. And what I've done is I've taken Liquitex Basics, dioxazine purple. This is thick, kind of a medium body acrylic. It's one of the thicker of the Liquitex Basics in my opinion. So with every pouring medium, I mix 3 parts pouring medium to 1 part paint with the dioxazine purple. Then for kind of a soft body acrylics, these Artist Loft, I have light green and phthalo blue. With these, I've done 2 parts pouring medium, 1 part paint. And last but not least, a Flow acrylic white from Artist Loft also. I did 1 part pouring medium, 1 part paint. And so I mixed every single one of these pouring mediums with that same ratio of paint, and then added water to get the right consistency. The consistency I used was where when you pour it off the stick, it makes a little mound, and then after a second or two disappears. Tried to do that the same across the board. If that ever didn't happen, I will mention it when doing the review. With each of these tests, I did 2 pours. A tree ring pour with just layers of the colors, and the second one was a dirty pour flip cup, where in the blue and the phthalo blue only, I put 1 drop of silicone oil so we could test how the oil interacts with the pouring medium. And I checked 4 different things. I checked how well the paint mixes, how well the colors look both at the beginning and once they're dry. Also, how the paint looks dry. Is it brilliant? Is it thick? Does it crack? Things like that. And then the cost of the paint. For each one of these, it's a 5-point scale, 5 being the best, 1 being the worst. And then I stacked rank them best to worst. I'm going to be reviewing them worst to best. And I have longer reviews on each one of these, which I will be posting in the notes below as those come out, because they are going to come out after this roundup video. So as those come out, I will post the review, the extended review on each one of those, where I show me mixing them and me talking about them when I'm pouring them out, and then afterwards when they're dry, and giving some notes and things on all of these pouring mediums. So let's get to the worst of the 11 pouring mediums that I tested. All right, the first pouring medium we're going to look at is Sargent Art pouring medium. Now, this pouring medium, when you mix it, it mixes just fine. I didn't have any problems mixing. It didn't make any clumps or bubbles or anything like that. So on the mixing department, I actually give this a 4 out of 5 stars. When this dried, this is where I had some problems with the Sargent pouring medium. So first of all, you can see this right here. See how yellow it is even on my hands, and see the little bubbles that it has in it. Has little bubbles and little hard marks there. That's what happens when this dries. This is just plain pouring medium with nothing else in it. It's pretty flexible, which is good, but it has these odd things that happened when it dried by itself, which I wasn't happy about. Not only that, but it's yellow when it dries. You can kind of see that here. It's a little bit off-white, you can see here, and when it dries, it actually dries yellow, which is unfortunate. The second part about being dry is, I'm going to pull this up here and Can you hear that tackiness? This has been dry for a week. No, 3 weeks now, and it's still tacky when it's dry. It does have a nice glossy sheen to it, which I do appreciate, but really to make sure it doesn't, when it's finished, to make sure you don't get dust and hairs and stuff sticking to it, you're gonna have to put something hard that isn't gonna attract that type of stuff. So I really didn't like that. I only gave it a 2 for how it dries. Now the color is one place where this is actually has some really good color. This is the side where I did my tree ring pour, and you can see some really nice layering. You can see some nice different color patterns, a little bit of transparency there, but there's some nice colors on that side. This is where the one, right here is where the one drop of oil was, and there are actually some really cool, I'm going to turn it this way, really cool little things that happen from the oil. However, one thing about the oil, the silicone oil, is it never really incorporated. It sat on the side of the cup, so when I did my flip cup, it all sat there together. So it is really hard to get the oil to incorporate. The dark colors on the flip cup, they just completely melded with each other. The white disappeared. Not sure exactly what happened there, but I did not like that at all with the Sargent pouring medium. So for color, because of how beautiful this side is and how beautiful these cells are, I'm going to give it a 4 out of 5 for color. Now cost is really my problem here. This pouring medium is about 91 cents per ounce. That's without any discounts. You know, if you go to a place like Michael's or Joann's or somewhere like that where you can get a discount in the US, you can get it cheaper. But retail, the cheapest you can get it is 91 cents per ounce, which puts it at the most expensive pouring medium. There's actually one more expensive, but it's $1. So I'm considering both of those the worst cost. So it only gets a 1 out of 5 for cost because it's 91 cents per ounce. Now this is relatively new, so I do anticipate them coming out with bigger amounts, kind of like the Floetrol and the other ones in the bigger gallon things. So the price does go down with quantities of scale. But for right now, I'm giving you a 1 for cost. So add those all up. 4 for mixing, 2 for dry, 4 for color, 1 for cost. We get a 2.8 average score, which is tied for the worst pouring medium that I dealt with. Next up, we have the US Art Gloss Pouring Medium. Now, when I was mixing this pouring medium, I have a serious problem. In order to get this to mix, I had to mix a teeny tiny bit of the pouring medium with all of the paint, mix it up, a little bit more pouring medium, mix it up, a little bit more pouring medium, mix it up, and it took forever to get to my 2-to-1, 3-to-1, and 1-to-1 pouring medium ratio. If I put all of it in and then tried to mix, the paint would not incorporate with the pouring medium, and that was horrible. This was the worst one for mixing because of that, of the pouring mediums. So for mixing, I give US Art Supply pouring medium a 1 out of 5 stars. With the dry, this one is also very glossy. You can see from my light there, it is very glossy. So I would call this a gloss finish, which is really nice. I like that a lot. The medium, when it's just dried by itself, I can't even pick that up because of my lowly Vifi map, but the medium itself is, let's not drop it there, is pretty see-through, not a lot of bubbles. It has some good strength to it. It's pretty thick also, so I can see this holding up really well in a painting. So for that, just the way it dries, the way it looks dry, how it dries by itself, I'm giving this a 4 out of 5 for drying. Color, it has great color. I mean, you can see this on the side where I have my tree ring pour. I have good colors, I have good mixes. It doesn't mix too much. I did lose some of my purple with this, but I do get some really cool shades of colors. It mixes well with this is from the silicone. It mixes well with the silicone. I get multicolor cells with the silicone. And I actually can see all of the colors on the flip cup. So when it comes to drying, or when it comes to color, I really like the color that this pouring medium gave to it. So for color, I'm giving it 4 out of 5 stars. Cost. This is the section that I'm calling the second worst cost, just because it's about in the 75-cent range per ounce. You can buy this in 16 ounce or 32 ounce. 16 ounce is about 87 cents an ounce. 32 ounce is about 75 cents per ounce. So for cost, I'm giving it a 2 out of 5. And again, it was just too hard to mix. The other thing is, if you get it on your hands, you almost needed solvent to get it off. It was very sticky, very nasty, and it was hard to get off the hands. Now granted, I should be wearing gloves. I don't like to wear gloves. So that's, if you're wearing gloves, it's probably a non-issue. It is a little bit sticky, but if you're not wearing gloves, be careful, it's gonna take a while to wash. Last but not least, that was interesting, this dried the fastest of any of the pouring mediums by a huge margin. 24 hours, it was dry to the touch, dry all the way through. As with any other paint, I recommend leaving it for 7, 14, 21 days to let it fully cure, but it was dry to the touch, and it's not tacky like the other one. So I actually really liked that about the paint. So if you add all those together, 1 for mix, 4 for dry, 4 for color, 2 for cost, it also comes out to a 2.8 score. Now, my thing with this is, if you have the patience and you're willing to mix and you don't worry about when it gets on your fingers, it's actually a pretty good pouring medium. But just right out of the box, for somebody that's doing new to pouring or has other options, I wouldn't choose this one because of those kind of big problems with the mixing. Okay, so next up on our list is Color Pour Pouring Medium, which is the Joanne Fabric version of pouring medium. And the Color Pour is the Joanne Fabric paints and color and pouring medium. So you can buy it exclusively there that I could find. And to start off with mixing, the purple, the green, and the white mixed just fine. However, for some odd reason, when I was trying to mix the phthalo blue, I could not get it to incorporate. It was chunky. It took forever to get the blue to mix with the pouring medium. I don't know if it's the chemical composition of the pouring medium and the actual pigment that's in the blue, but it was not easy to get that to mix, which is unfortunate. Again, the other ones seem to be fine. The other problem about this was when you mix this with the purple, it mixed well, but the consistency, the actual feel of the paint and the flow of the paint when it was coming off my stick, completely different from all the other colors. And I really dislike having to really adjust everything based on color. So that was a big negative spot for this. Not quite as bad as the US Art Supply. So in this case, I'm going to give it a 2 out of 5 for mix. Drying. This is more of a satiny finish. It doesn't have a lot of super shine there. Probably between satin and semi-gloss. I wouldn't consider it quite semi-gloss. But it has a nice texture. It's even. It flattened out. It actually dried really nicely. And I want to show you this. Let me get my thing again so I can get it off. So this is the pouring medium just dry by itself. It looks good. There's not a lot of bubbles. It has some good pull to it, so it can shift and move based on temperature and color of your pour, temperature and how much water's in the air where your pour is. It's a little bit thinner than some of the other ones of this same type, but it actually is dry like this. It is really nice. So I like that. On the dry side, I'm giving Color Pour 4 out of 5 stars. Next is cost. This was the most expensive pouring medium at $1 per ounce. You can only buy it in the 8 ounce as of this video that I could find. So $1 per ounce puts it in the most expensive category. So in that regard, I'm going to give it a 1 out of 5. I skipped color, but we're going to get to that. The color of this, I actually really like the color. I got some really cool colors here. I got my blue, I got my purple, I got my green, I got my white, everything there, and I have some cool combinations. So it worked really well on the tree ring pour. The cells, I didn't get lots of colors from them, but they're pretty pronounced and pretty nice. And I don't have any divots or anything. It's nice and smooth, so it works well with the silicone oil. The flip cup, I didn't get quite as good of a result. This part is really cool. I really like it, but the darker ones kind of mix together. So, but it was one of the best looking pouring mediums of all the ones that I tested. So in this case, Color Pour got a 5 out of 5 for, that's 5 out of 5 for color. So that gives us a 2 for mixing, a 4 for dry, 5 for color, 1 for cost, which comes out to 3 out of 5 stars overall for the Color Pour pouring medium. Next, in position 8 out of 11, we have the DecoArt pouring medium. Now, DecoArt is a craft paint. They came out with a pouring medium, and when I was mixing the DecoArt, I had the same problem that I had with the Color Pour in that the blue did not mix well. It took forever. It didn't integrate. It had lots of little pieces of blue, which you can kind of see in here, that didn't really fully get integrated, which I didn't like that at all. The rest of the colors seemed to be fine, but the blue, it was just not easy to mix. So for that, I'm just going to ding it a little bit. So that got 3 out of 5 for mixing. Drying, so you can see this. This also has the kind of semi-gloss finish, between semi-gloss and satin type finish. It's nice and smooth. It dries well on the edges. So, and then looking at the dried piece of just the pouring medium, as you can see, it is slightly brownish, yellowish than compared to other items. It did have a few bubbles. You can kind of see there. It's very thin, very flexible, but it is very, very thin. So it doesn't feel like it's as robust as the other pouring mediums. So because of that, everything else is fine. It's just a little bit less than I would expect. So I'm giving that a 3 on how it dries. Next is color. As you can see, I actually have some pretty nice colors here. I lost my purple. I didn't see much there with the tree ring pour. And then if I flip it over, you see lots of caterpillar cells. That was one interesting thing about the 1 drop of silicone, and I mixed it in well, created tons of caterpillar cells, and I've actually had this happen multiple times. It doesn't mix well. It's almost like it mixes and immediately finds his cell to cause this. The other thing about the color is the white just took over everything. And I don't particularly like that. I don't like how it kind of get white. Everything gets whitewashed. Everything looks white. Granted, you can use less white when you're using the DecoArt pouring medium, and that's definitely what I would recommend. But trying to do this full comparison, I kind of ding it for that. So for the color, I'm going to give it 3. Again, it's just average. So for the cost, this is 63 cents per ounce, which is middle of the road for all the pouring mediums that I tested. So it's going to get a middle of the road price, or middle of the road scoring. So also 3. So 3 across the board. So the DecoArt pouring medium gets a 3 overall. All right, the next completely average, not to spoil the score, pouring medium that I looked at is the DecoArt pouring medium. This is another pouring medium from a DecoArt does a lot of craft paints, and they have this pouring medium. So with DecoArt, initially I hated this paint when I was mixing it up. It was so hard to get the right consistency. But after waiting for a little while and thinking about it for a few days, I recognized that every pouring medium is different. And the fact that it was different for all of the colors rather than like some of the other ones where the blue was fine, the purple wasn't, and things like that. Once I got the hang of it, I was able to get the consistency that I wanted, but know that if you do the DecoArt pouring medium, it's going to be different than all of the other pouring mediums. How the paint flows off is going to be slightly different, and you'll have to work with that. So ultimately, it mixed with everything once I figured that out. So I calmed down a little bit, and I gave that a 3 out of 5. Next is dry. This actually has a semi-gloss, almost glossy finish. That's actually pretty nice. The one thing I don't like about how it dried is it didn't seem to flatten out as much as all the other paints do, so I can kind of see where the different paints were. And especially on the edges didn't get as much paint. The pouring medium didn't kind of bind to keep a nice even layer. So you need to be careful about that. I would recommend if you use DecoArt, you use more paint than you're expecting to make sure that it flows over really nice and you get what you want in that regard. So on this piece, with the pouring medium just dry by itself, it's actually just slightly off of, sorry, get that to focus, just slightly off of clear, but it's pretty thick. Definitely durable. It's a lot stronger than some of the other ones that we've looked at. So in that regard, it's pretty nice. So again, it's average. Overall, it's average on its dry, so I'm going to give it 3 out of 5 stars. Color. This is the weird one. So this is exactly opposite of folk art in that the darks just took over with this pouring medium. I did get some nice, really cool layering there, and the white kind of seeped into the other colors, which was, good and bad. It depends on what you're looking for. I guess I should go this way so you can see that. So the tree ring pour was kind of odd in that regard. The flip cup I didn't really like at all, except for how it worked with the silicone. Those were some of the coolest and oddest cells that I got. So that was one thing that I really liked about the color and the interaction with the silicone. So again, the darks took over. I really didn't like that, so it got an average score of 3. Cost-wise, 63 cents per ounce. Again, right middle of the road compared to the other ones that I have. This was the only one that I could find. The only size that I could find, so that makes it about 63 cents per ounce. The last but not least, again with this one, it was very hard to get off my hands when I got the paint on my hands. So be wary if you're going to use this. You're going to either need to wear gloves or take a lot of time to get the paint off your hands. Overall, 3s across the board, so the score was 3. Next up in our roundup, we have the Artist Loft pouring medium. So this is pretty new in the last year that this came out, and a lot of people really like Artist Loft's pre-mixed acrylic paints. This is the pouring medium just by itself, and again I've mixed them in the ratios that I mentioned at the beginning of the video. And so to start out, mixing wise, the Artist Loft mixed well with all of the different colors. I didn't have any problem mixing. It wasn't quite as good as the best ones, but it was pretty good. So in that regard, we're giving that a 4 out of 5 for mixing for the Artist Loft. So the next is the dry. This dries pretty glossy. You can kind of see there, it dries pretty glossy. And it dried nice and even, and it feels good. I don't have any divots or things like that, so in that regard, it's really nice. Here's the pouring medium just by itself. So this is, let's see if I can get it to focus there. So this is a nice thickness. It's not quite as solid as some of the other ones, but it does have some give to it. I put my finger in there. You can see my fingerprint before it was dry. And not a lot of bubbles and no cracks or crazes. So that actually is really nice how it dries there. So in the end, I actually really liked how this one dried. So again, it was above average, so it's going to get a 4 on how well it dried. Color-wise, had some interesting things happen here. With the ring pour, the colors really mixed a lot. Now I will, any of you that have done a ring pour like this, anytime you get these jagged edges means that the pouring medium was probably a little more liquid than it needed to be. So part of that is going to be my fault. But I didn't get a lot of definition, although there was this one section right here that I got a lot of nice color, different layers of color there. So part of this was my fault. Part of it was just how it interacts with the paint. So on this side, two odd things here. The silicone, when it mixed up, it mixed really well. It was everywhere. So you see silicone cells everywhere. Some of them are really cool, like this, that little tiny one there, that almost looks like the deep blue where they go scuba diving in the ocean. And then this one right here, all these nice beautiful colors here. So you can get some really nice cells with silicone in the Artist Loft pouring medium. But again, I lost some of the definition of the color and it kind of washed into each other. I have no purple in the dirty pour. So in that regard, I'm just going to give it an average score. So that color-wise, it's getting 3 out of 5. Cost, you can get this in 8 ounces, which is about 75 cents an ounce. 17 ounces, which I have here, which is about 59 cents an ounce. And 64 ounces, you can get it down to 47 cents per ounce. Now again, that's before other discounts. So obviously you could get like the 20, 40, 50, 60% off at Michaels, because Artist Loft is the Michaels brand of paint and pouring medium. So cost-wise, this is some of the best cost. So it is getting a rating of 4 for cost. So again, this is about, the two we reviewed before were kind of average pouring mediums. This one's going to be an above average pouring medium. And I will say one thing that it does say on the bottom. Some of these don't say how to mix. This one does say 5 parts pouring medium to 1 part paint. So that might also have accounted for some of this that was happening. So keep that in mind when you're mixing your paints. But overall, I got a 4 for mix, a 4 for dry, a 3 for color, a 4 for cost, which gives this a score of 3.8 out of 5, which is definitely the above average on my scale that I'm doing here for the Artist Loft pouring medium. Next on our list, we have this big mamma jamma, Flood Floetrol. Now this is not a proper pouring medium. It is a paint conditioner that you actually add to regular paint to give it a more flowy texture and to self-level better. So again, it says it eliminates brush and roller marks. That's what it's used for. It works quite well as pouring medium, and a lot of people use it. So I'm using this as a non-traditional pouring medium, but it does get used a lot. So with Floetrol, I've used this quite a bit. It mixes well with every single one of the colors. I didn't have any problem with the Flow Acrylic, didn't have any problem with the soft body or the medium body acrylics with the Liquitex Basics. It does take a little bit longer than some of the other pouring mediums to mix, but it does fully incorporate. I haven't really had many problems in the past mixing. That being the case, I give the Floetrol a 4 on the mixing scale. So dry, this is one of the odd things. This is one of the paints that actually dries, and I'm going to do this first. This dries very matte. And if you can see there, there's lots of little bubbles in that. That is very common for the Floetrol. It is also very, very thin. Doesn't have a lot of give that some of the other ones do have. So in that regard, how long your paints are going to last, house paints are usually 10 to 15 years is what they last. This Floetrol, I'm assuming is the same, but I haven't done any specific investigation about that. So it's not the greatest when it dries. You can kind of see here also it's very matte. You don't get a lot of shine at all on that. But it does dry even. I mean, that's really what it was made to do. So for drying, I'm giving the Floetrol only a 3. It's just a middle of the road. Not the best, not the worst. It works fine. Color-wise, because it's dull, you don't get the colors that jump out at you. With Floetrol, you either use it to get this kind of duller color, or you have to put a gloss medium on top to really make it jump out. But one nice thing, you see all those little tiny cells? Floetrol is a cell creator. It does make some nice little lines here. You can see the purple, the green, the blue, the white. They're all right here in the tree ring pour, which is nice. The white does take over a little bit, so you got to worry about too much white in a Floetrol painting. Now here is the Floetrol with the silicone. There were some couple odd colored, kind of amoeba colored cells here. Lots of little tiny cells. It's hard to see in the picture here, but you can see, that way you can see kind of the purple around the blue. You can kind of see how it moves around there. So it does show up there to the naked eye. It's not very good on video to kind of see that, but dry-wise, or excuse me, I just said 3 for dry. Color-wise, I'm just going to give it a 3. It's average. Not the best, not the worst. Again, I've done a lot of paintings with Floetrol, and the reason I've done a lot of paintings with Floetrol is because it's so cheap. For a gallon, 128 ounces, it's about 12 cents per ounce. It blows all of the other pouring mediums out of the water. And for that reason, I give it a 5 on cost. It is by far the cheapest one. I highly recommend, if you're new to paint pouring, that you use Floetrol, especially if you're in the United States. I know some other countries it's harder to find. The Oatrol in Australia and other places is a little more expensive. But I highly recommend doing your initial pours and learning acrylic paint pouring with Floetrol, and then moving on to some of these other pouring mediums. So overall, 4 for mixing, 3 for dry, 3 for color, 5 for cost, also puts it at 3.8, tied with Artist Loft as the above average pouring mediums. Next up we have Elmer's Glue All. Now there are a lot of different types of glue. I've used a bunch of different ones, and Glue All has worked the best for me. Other people have different glues that they use that work just fine. I would recommend not using school glue because there's less binder and more water in school glue to make it easier to clean up. I would also not recommend clear glue, at least not the Elmer's clear glue. Now I know there's a couple of people like Pour Your Heart Out has a YouTube channel, and she uses clear glue in Australia that works really well. I love her paintings. So this is going to be a little bit different based on the product. We're just looking at Elmer's Glue All at this point. So Elmer's Glue All, again, as a new acrylic paint pouring, just like with Floetrol, highly recommend it. It's going to be thicker than Floetrol. Generally with Glue All, you have to add water, quite a bit of water. Usually when I buy this, I remove some of this and do 70% glue, 30% water, and that's what I use for my pouring medium. Actually, to show you, it's exactly what I put on my bottle when I do it. This is mixed already, so it's a little bit more liquidy because the glue is so thick initially. So it mixes really well with paint. When you're first starting out, use glue first and then add water later. Once you get an idea of what you want to do, some people do 20% glue, 80% 80% glue, 20% water, excuse me, just to make it thicker. You can learn all of that by going through it, and it's a great pouring medium to start out with. It mixed with all of the different colors, the Flow Acrylic White, the medium body Liquitex Basics, and the kind of soft body Artist Loft Blue and Green. So on the mixing, I gave that a 4. It's not quite as good as some of the ones that we're going to talk about in just a second, but it was pretty good. Next, we're going to talk about dries. This is one of the weird things about glue all. It's glue, so obviously it dries hard, but unlike other pouring mediums, this glue, let's see if I can get it to focus, this glue dries kind of brittle. It's not very thick. You can see that when I pulled it up, it kind of lost its shape, and it has very little give. So when it dries, it's going to be very hard, and it won't have a lot of give. The thing you got to worry about that is, I have this painting that I made a while ago, and I accidentally stuck my finger in the painting. And so you can see where it just broke. The paint just broke. So you probably will want to have some sort of sealer on top when you use glue, or use it to learn. It dries nice and flat. It dries hard. So in that regard, it's just middle of the road. I'm just giving it a 3, depending on where you're at. The other thing about glue is if you add water, if there's water on it, it will, until it gets hard, it will break down with water. And even when it's hard, if you get a ton of water on it and you scrape, the colors will come off. So you got to worry about that. Usually I tell you, if you have glue and you want to keep it, put a sealer on to give it a little bit more strength, keep it from buckling like you just saw, and to give it kind of a more shiny look, because it dries pretty dull also. I mean, this is probably a satin rather than a flat like the Floetrol. So that's kind of a negative. Again, I give it a 3 out of 5 for drying. Color-wise, you can get some really good colors, but they're not going to jump out at you like some of the other pouring mediums. One thing I really like about glue is how awesome it interacts with silicone. Look at these. Some of those cells are just amazing in the dirty pour side of this. And again, I'll mention, I got this a little bit too wet. You can see all the jagged edges on the tree ring pour and how the colors kind of mixed into each other. That's because I had this too wet. I did still get some nice color between the darker colors. So on the color wise, I actually like how the glue all looks, but it is a little bit dull, and you really got to be careful with the consistency. So in that regard, we're giving glue a 3 on its color. Cost, again, is where this wins. Glue all is also about 12 cents per gallon. It's about 15 bucks for a gallon. Comes out to about 12 cents when you divide it by the 128 ounces. So it's very cheap, easy to find. You can find it at Lowe's, Home Depot, Walmart. Sometimes the craft stores even have it. All different sizes. I like to buy it in the biggest size because it's obviously the cheaper with the economies of scale. So again, mixes well with silicone. It's a great one to start out with. You got to be careful if you're going to keep it that you probably want to put something to give it a little bit of shine and also to give it a little additional strength, because while it's strong and will bind well, it is brittle if you hit it straight on, or like I did with the other painting. So overall, 4 for mixing, 3 for dry, 3 for color, 5 for cost, almost exactly the same as Floetrol. Comes in at 3.8, so this is tied with Floetrol and Artist Loft pouring medium as the above average pouring mediums. So really quickly, I'm going to go over the pouring mediums that we've covered so far. If this is the type of content you really like, I would appreciate it if you would like, subscribe, and maybe put a comment below about some questions that have come up since I've been reviewing these pouring mediums. And in just 1 second, we will get to the top 3 pouring mediums. All right, we're into the top 3. So this is the 3rd best pouring medium according to my scale that I'm using. Liquitex pouring medium. Now the Liquitex pouring medium is definitely a professional pouring medium. Liquitex is a name brand that probably all of you that are doing paint pouring have heard. I was using Liquitex paint in this this experiment. So Liquitex, as you would expect, mixed so well with the paints. All the different kinds of paints, it mixed, it incorporated, didn't take very long, didn't make a lot of bubbles. Loved it. Liquitex, by far in the top of the scale, 5 out of 5 for mixing. Dried, couple cool things about Liquitex. I'm going to look at this first. So Liquitex, I mean, you can see the glossiness of the Liquitex just from here. It is very transparent. There's no really off colors. There's very little bubbles or anything in this. This is not as durable as other, it doesn't move around, but you can tell that it's flexible. It doesn't break. It's very thick. It's one of the thickest pouring mediums that there is of the ones that I tested. So really like how this pouring medium looks. Also with the color, it's more of a semi-gloss color that looks at there, and it has a nice even coat. Now one thing that I will say about for drying, I also give Liquitex a 5. It is very good. How it looks dry, how it feels, how strong it's going to be, reputation. It's just a very good pouring medium. Being in the top 3, you'd expect that. Color, the colors were actually quite vivid. With the Liquitex, I get some nice color on the ends. Nice color definition. Again, this is a little bit thinner than some of the other ones, so I don't get quite the lines that I would normally get. I have done lots of paintings with Liquitex. As you can see, this is empty. So I've done a lot of paintings with Liquitex in the last little while and got some really good colors. So this might not be the prettiest example, but there are amazing paintings coming out of the Liquitex here. One thing I did not like about the Liquitex is that when it mixed with the silicone, it left divots. See that divot there? And up here I have another divot. It left divots where the silicone was. It really did not interact well with the silicone. So if you're going to use silicone with Liquitex, make sure you have a base coat down so that when it does this, there's paint underneath it and it doesn't cause these divots to happen. So color-wise, again, this is not the best example of Liquitex, but I'm going to give color-wise a 5 for the Liquitex gloss medium. Where the gloss medium does fall down is cost. If you get an 8-ounce bottle of Liquitex pouring medium, it's about $1.87 per ounce, which is just ridiculously expensive. However, if you get it in this gallon, 128 ounces again, it goes down to about 78 cents per ounce, which means it's cheaper than a lot of the other, like the US Art Supply pouring medium, the Sargent Art pouring medium, because they don't come in the bigger supplies, you don't get economies of scale, much cheaper. Also, highly recommend if you're going to buy Liquitex, buy it in bulk. Buy it at like Michael's or Joann's on one of the 40%, 50% discount on regular price. This is $99. I got it 60% off, so it was $40 for 128 ounces, which is, it's the second cheapest pouring medium if you buy it at that scale. So definitely highly recommend if you're going to buy it in bulk. It'll last a long time. It works really well. I really like the Liquitex pouring medium. One thing to note, it is a little bit thicker than the other pouring mediums, although it thins the paint quicker, which is really odd. It seems like it's thicker, but it actually thins the paint as you're mixing it a lot quicker. So the last thing that I worry about the pouring medium, you can't use Artist Loft like this Flow Acrylic. It doesn't work very well with the Liquitex. You're much better off using the titanium white, either from Liquitex or from somewhere else that has some additional binder, and then you won't get it lost in your painting. So just an oddity about Liquitex. So cost, I give it 2. 5, 5, 5, and 2 puts it at 4.3, and that actually is tied for second. So this is this and the next pouring medium are tied for second with the second best score of all of them. All right, the number 2 pouring medium, Golden GAC 800. Now this isn't specifically a pouring medium, but it is an additive that you use to prevent crazing and cracking in your pour acrylic paints. So it actually works really well as a pouring medium by itself. A lot of people add this to their favorite pouring medium just to give it a little more strength and to keep stuff from crazing. It can work just by itself as a pouring medium. Mixing was a gem on the GAC 800. All of the paints mixed well, they mix quickly. So in that regard, perfect 5 for the GAC 800 for mixing. Dried, this is by far my favorite painting of all the tests that we did. It looks the best. It has some really good definition, really good color quality of the different colors of paint. I've got nice little detailed lines on the flip cup side. The silicone oil didn't mix as well, but it did create some pretty cool looking effects, just not the normal specific cells that we're looking on. But I did get all the colors. This is one of the best ones to see the purple color. Kind of hard to see there. I get the white, the cool white and green here, but I did get purple and blue around the edges, which I didn't see on a lot of paintings. They kind of mix together. So I really like how the color is. So color-wise, kind of out of order, but again, I'm giving it 5 out of 5. Dried, the GAC is semi-gloss. You can see a nice gloss finish. Nice and flat. I don't have any divots from the silicone, so that's really nice. This, you can see here, it's kind of an off-white color on my Lolly Beefy silicone matte. So it's not quite white, but it is thick. It is durable. It has a little bit more give than the Liquitex did. So these bubbles happen because of how I poured it out, not because they were part of it. And this is just a little bit of white paint that I didn't notice was on the mat when it happened. So it's thick. It's nice, no crazing. You wouldn't expect that because that's what it's actually built for. So dry-wise, perfect 5 also for the Golden GAC 800. Cost, again, exactly like the Liquitex. Cost is where it falls down. This 8 ounce was $2.62 per ounce. A 128 ounce is about $1.33 per ounce. So that was on Amazon. If I got it like at, I found later that I could get the gallon at Michael's, and it was only about $1.10, $1.05 per ounce. And then obviously economies of scale, just the same thing. If I buy in bulk and use that one discount, you can get it down to a more reasonable price. But cost-wise, it's only getting 2 out of 5 stars because of that. I have not used GAC by itself very often. I really like it. It's very expensive. Probably what I'll do is I'll add it to my pouring medium of choice just to make sure that I get that extra support. But in a bind, it can make a beautiful pouring medium. Like I said, this is my favorite painting of the tests that I did. Drum roll. Golden color pouring medium gloss was the best pouring medium that I tested. By a very slight margin, which we'll talk about right at the end here, but it was the best pouring medium. I had not used Golden very much before. For some reason, there's a better picture of it, if I can get it to focus. For some reason, I was scared, 1, because of the price, and 2, because it was just daunting to use a pouring medium that's this supposedly nice professional pouring medium. So when I finally did get to use it, I had great results. Mixing, it mixed amazing. Just like the other pouring mediums did, I didn't have any problems mixing well. It mixed with all the different colors, all the different pouring mediums. And so 5 out of 5 for color pouring medium gloss from Golden. Dried. Now this is slightly off-white, not near as much as most of the other ones, and I didn't see that it changed the color at all, so I'm not worried about that. But this has a great thickness, a great consistency. It has some give, but not a lot. It's a little bit thick. So just like the GAC 800 and the Liquitex pouring medium, I like how it is, and I think it's going to last a long time. Nice and flat, even with the silicone. So dry wise, 5 out of 5. Just like you'd expect. Color, this is my second favorite painting and my first favorite tree ring. That little section right there with all the different colors is just amazing. I really like that section. I got some sweet color here. I got lots of different color. The color was separated, unlike some of the other ones. I got some cool little cells kind of on the outside where the silicone bled into my pour. White always seems to have this problem, but you do have to be a little bit careful with it taking over. Normally I would add a little bit of a more higher quality white with my Flow acrylic just to make it go further, and it will keep this kind of overwashed or washed out white looking. I was a little bit disappointed in the flip cup. It didn't turn out nearly as well, but I did get some really cool effects with the silicone. Not always. You know, these effects were really cool. This was kind of blah. These were kind of blah. But I did get some cool effects with the silicone, and it didn't do near as much pitting. It did a tiny bit, but not near as much as the Liquitex did. So color-wise, again, 5 out of 5. Where Golden color pouring medium actually beat out Liquitex and GAC 800 is cost. Interestingly enough, the pouring medium for this was about $1.50 an ounce at 8 ounces. And when you buy it in a gallon, it's only about 64 cents per ounce. So if you get a good discount, that brings it down to really reasonable per ounce cost for the pouring medium. Now, this talks about, on the instructions, they talk about mixing it with the Flow acrylic from Golden, which is really highly pigmented, very wet. So this is like 10 to 1 for the pigment there. I wouldn't ever recommend that. I do want to do some more testing on this to maybe do 4 to 1, 5 to 1 with some of the nicer acrylic paints that we have. But overall, Golden color pouring medium is going to win the race on the pouring mediums. 5 on mix, 5 on dry, 5 on color, 3 on cost puts it at 4.5 compared to the 4.3 that Golden GAC 800 and Liquitex gloss medium get. So there you have it. I hope I've saved you a little bit of time. I hope I've opened your eyes to some different pouring mediums and some ways to test pouring mediums, some things you need to think about when you're using a pouring medium going forward. Just a reminder, again, if this is the type of content you like, please subscribe, leave a comment. If there's some questions that you have, I'd be happy to answer those. And enjoy your pouring.